Huntress is one of the base game killers in the survivor horror multiplayer game Dead by Daylight. Whether playing as her or trying to escape from her chase, Huntress almost always hums a Russian lullaby called Bayu Bayushka Bayu from her childhood. This lullaby was sung by Huntress's mother as she died after suffering a fatal injury while hunting. The audio spatialization of this hum, and how this and other audio is heard according to what role players choose, takes on different approaches. These approaches can give players situational and emotional cues that affect the game. The first musical elements both survivors and killers will hear after entering the game is a lullaby. The hum from the killer's perspective is just as distant as it is for the survivor, so we can assume that the same audio file and reverb are used for both parties. While Huntress will immediately start humming this lullaby, it may take a few seconds for the survivors to hear it. This is due to terms called the terror radius and a non-terror radius, during which certain sounds are cued, and we'll come back to this. While the lullaby non-terror radius starts at 45 meters, her terror radius begins at 20. According to the game's mechanics, all lullabies are non-directional and have a fixed range. This means the audio will not sound like it's coming from a certain direction when hearing it as a survivor, and it will not change spatially in size or distance, meaning that there aren't any changes in reverb time that indicate the distance, whether it's 45 meters or 3 meters. I believe that the reverb effect on the lullaby is done in order to create a feeling of being haunted. The use of an unchanging reverb creates a constant feeling of distance. In-game, Huntress is far from her deceased mother, therefore the lullaby sounds distant. The reverb also makes the hum seem like it's coming from the back of the survivors' heads, and the static melody pushes the idea of the lullaby constantly following the survivor. The lullaby's mechanics provide some clues for survivors. The distance mechanic works well for survivors because they can usually hear a full melody line from the lullaby before they engage in the chase. This is a great hint for survivors at the beginning of the game because it tells the players which killer they're facing and that they're within 45 meters of the killer. But these mechanics become altered when chase music is introduced. Chase music is part of the killer's terror radius. Because Huntress is a base game killer, both the survivor and the killer will only hear one of 3 generic chase songs. This is different from DLC characters who have unique chase music like the Demogorgon and Nemesis. No matter the song, the chase music has 4 layers: far, near, close, and chase. From the killer perspective, Huntress's lullaby will play throughout all stages, but will decrease in volume and come in and out during chase. There is much less attention put on the lullaby during chase. From the survivor perspective, the lullaby will completely stop during chase and resume when the survivor has been downed and cannot run away. The hum dropping out and the chase music playing alone creates a sense of panic and urgency. This is done using fast-paced and dissonant strings, percussion, and a heartbeat. It's as if the source of the hum is no longer haunting, but rather is right in front of the survivor. While both the humming and the terror radius music play, other audio cues are triggered if Huntress does certain actions. Some of these include a grunt as she throws a hatchet, the sound of a hatchet hitting the survivor's surroundings, or opening a locker. Unlike the humming and the terror radius music, these sounds are directional. These sounds are also ranged, meaning they have a certain reverb according to how distant the survivor is from the killer. For example, if a hatchet lands close to a survivor, it will have a shorter reverb than one that lands further away. While Huntress's lullaby may seem repetitive, there are some variations to it. The original recording of her lullaby is roughly 6 minutes. The further into the game you get, the more unhinged she becomes and sounds. This is shown through the way she vocalizes the lullaby. Throughout the loop, Huntress switches from humming to singing using la. She also begins to stray from the original cadence and moves throughout the melody differently, accenting different parts as she goes. If you're around her long enough to get to the end of the loop without engaging in chase, Huntress laughs in between phrases. She also takes occasional pauses in her singing, and after every phrase she takes a quick, sharp breath and continues. All of this is done to make Huntress seem disturbed. Huntress is one of the game's most interesting killers as far as audio goes. There are many different layers to how her lullaby works, not just technically, but also how it makes the players feel. While Terry radius music is important, both the lullaby and the radius need to work together while not overwhelming the player with noise. While in some cases it might make sense to have both at full volume, it might not mesh well with the player's ears. Sometimes there needs to be a line drawn as to what makes sense for the in-game survivor versus what makes sense for the player. That's why it's important that this game has different categories for whether her specific audio and audio cues are connected to distance via reverb or direction according to the survivor's proximity to Huntress.